Sam Delaney gave a struggling street vendor $20 on a Tuesday in October. He didn't think about it again. That's the truth of most kindness. You do the small thing, and it falls out of your mind by the time you've reached the corner, and you never learn where it went. Sam gave a man $20 for a small wooden owl, and he drove home, and by dinner he had forgotten it entirely. The man did not forget it. The man spent that $20 on a single block of good basswood, the first decent wood he'd been able to afford in over a year, and everything that happened after grew out of that block, one carving at a time. 9 months later, that man walked into Sam Delaney's office in Burbank. He walked in on the single worst day Sam had had in a very long time, and what he brought with him, what he set down on Sam's desk, did not just change the man's life. It saved something in Sam's. This is a story about the strangest thing about kindness, that you almost never find out where it lands, and that sometimes, when you finally do, it turns out you were secretly planting the very thing that would one day come back and carry you. There is a corner in Los Angeles, outside a hardware store on a wide sunlit street, where a man used to sell hand-carved wooden animals off a folding table. 10,000 people walked past him. This is the story of the one who stopped. His name was Yusuf Haddad, and once, in a city on the other side of the world, he had been a master. For 30 years, in Aleppo, Yusuf Haddad had run one of the finest woodworking shops in the old city. A workshop his grandfather had opened, with tools worn smooth by 3 generations of Haddad hands. He made furniture that lasted 100 years. He carved doors that people came from other provinces to commission. Wedding chests. Prayer stands inlaid with mother of pearl. He had 11 men working under him, and he knew wood the way a musician knows a song, by feel, in the dark, with his eyes closed. In his city, in his life, Yusuf Haddad was somebody. When he walked through the market, men called him Ustad, master, and then the war came, and it took all of it. It took the workshop in a single afternoon to a shell that turned 3 generations of tools into splinters and dust. It took the old city. It took 2 of his 11 men. And eventually, because there was nothing left and staying meant dying, it took Yusuf and his wife Amira and his daughter Layla, out of the only home any of them had ever known, across a border and a sea and a bureaucracy, and set them down. 4 years and a lifetime later, in an apartment in Los Angeles, where nobody had ever heard the word Ustad, and nobody ever would. In America, Yusuf Haddad was nobody. That is the thing no one warns you about. His 30 years of mastery meant nothing here. No license. No papers the state recognized. No reputation that had survived the crossing. He applied for work at furniture makers and cabinet shops and got no answer. Because his English was still coming, and his Ursum was a workshop that no longer existed in a country people only saw on the news. He was 54 years old, and he had been one of the great craftsmen of an ancient city, and he could not get hired to sand a table. So he did the only thing left. He bought a folding table and some cheap tools, and he began carving small animals out of whatever scrap wood he could scavenge. Little owls, horses, cats, foxes. And he set up on a corner outside a hardware store. And he sold them to strangers for a few dollars each. And he sent Layla to school and told her every morning that this was temporary. That a Haddad does not stay down. That the wood remembers even when the world forgets. He believed it less every month. $9 on a good day, $3 on a bad one. And the specific, grinding shame of a master reduced to selling trinkets to people who did not look at him, who took the carving and dropped the coins, and walked away already forgetting he was a person, was wearing something down in Yusuf Haddad, that he was not sure could be built back. That was the man behind the folding table on the Tuesday in October. A master the world had decided was nothing. Carving owls out of scrap, waiting for someone to see him. Sam Delaney saw him. Sam had stopped at the hardware store for wood glue. He was always building something, and he came out and almost walked past the folding table the way everyone walked past it. But Sam Delaney had a lifelong weakness, and the weakness was craftsmanship. Real craftsmanship. The kind you cannot fake. And something on that table stopped him cold. It was a small owl, maybe 3 inches tall, and even from a step away, Sam could see that it was not a trinket. The feathers were rendered with a delicacy that took a knife and a lifetime to learn. The face had an expression. It was, Sam understood immediately, the work of a serious person. A master hiding in plain sight on a sidewalk. He picked it up. He turned it over in his hands the way you handle something made with love. And he looked up at the man behind the table. Really looked. And he did not see a street vendor. He saw the hands. Scarred. Precise. A craftsman's hands. And he asked the question that changed everything. The question nobody had asked Yusuf Haddad in 4 years. Who taught you to carve like this? Yusuf Haddad looked up, startled, at a man in a canvas jacket and old boots holding his owl like it mattered. And for the first time in a very long time, someone was looking at him the way you look at a person, and asking about his work the way you ask a professional. My grandfather, Yusuf, said slowly. In Syria. In Aleppo. I had a workshop there. 30 years. He almost stopped himself. He had learned that Americans' eyes glazed over when he said it, but something in the man's face made him go on. Furniture, doors, real work. This, he gestured at the little animals, and his voice caught on something. This is not my work. This is what is left. And Sam Delaney, who knew a thing or two about what's left after you lose the life you had, set the owl down gently and put out his hand. Sam, he said. Yusuf, I've held a lot of carved things in my life, and this is real. You know that, right? You didn't stop being a master because you crossed an ocean. The wood didn't forget. Neither should you. He picked the owl back up. I'd like to buy this. And I want to tell you something, if you'll let me. He took out his wallet. He had a 20. He gave Yusuf the 20 for a $5 owl and waved off the change. And then he did the thing that actually mattered. The thing worth more than the money. I run a small film company. Not a big flashy one. We make little movies about real people. The kind Hollywood thinks nobody wants. He took out a card and wrote a name on the back of it. We have a scene shop. We build sets, props, furniture, and we are always looking for people who can actually build things instead of faking them. Master carpenters don't grow on trees out here. He pressed the card into Yusuf's hand, on top of the 20. That's my shop foreman, Dale. You call him, you tell him Sam sent you, and you show him this owl. That's the whole interview. He'll know in 10 seconds what I know. Yusuf held the card. He held the 20. He looked at this stranger who had stopped and seen him, and something rose in his throat that he could not speak past. Call him, Sam said again, gently. You're not a trinket man, Yusuf. Don't let a hard year convince you that you are. Then, Sam Delaney got in his truck and drove home, and by dinner, the way it always goes, he had forgotten the whole thing. Yusuf Haddad did not call. He wanted to. God, how he wanted to. But you have to understand what 4 years of being nobody does to a proud man. Yusuf looked at that card for weeks. He kept it in his shirt pocket, over his heart, and he took it out at night and turned it over. And every time he reached for the phone, the fear rose up and stopped him. The fear that it wasn't real, that the foreman would laugh, that tell him Sam sent you was the kind of thing rich men say to feel good and don't mean, that he would call and be humiliated one more time, and he was not sure he had one more humiliation left in him. It is easier, when you have been broken enough, to keep a door closed than to open it and find nothing behind it. A closed door can still be a hope. An open one can be the end of hope. So, he didn't call. He kept the card. And he spent the $20, that same day, actually, on the one thing his pride would let him spend it on. A single block of good basswood. Clean and pale and begging to be worked. The first decent wood he'd touched since Aleppo. He carved it into an owl. A real one, this time. Not scrap. Not a rush job. But the best thing he had made in 4 years, made from good wood by a man who had just, for one afternoon, been reminded that he was a master. A woman at the farmer's market saw that owl. She ran a little stall of handmade things, and she stopped the way Sam had stopped, and she asked Yusuf if he'd like to sell a few pieces at her table on weekends. And that was the beginning. It was slow. It was so slow. But over 9 months, one carving at a time, Yusuf Haddad began, impossibly, to climb. The market stall led to a small following. The following led to a woodworking co-op that let him use their tools at night. And somewhere in there, Yusuf did the thing that told you who he really was. He found 4 other men, refugees like him, craftsmen the country had thrown away. A tailor from Homs, a stonemason from Mosul, men drowning the way he'd been drowning, and he started teaching them, in a church basement on Thursday nights, everything he knew. Because a Haddad does not stay down. And because the only thing better than being seen, he was learning, is turning around and seeing someone else. He never called Dale. He never used the card. He climbed out of the hole with his own hands, which is what he'd sworn to Layla he would do. But he kept the card in his shirt pocket the whole time, over his heart, like a man keeps a thing that once told him the truth about himself. While Yusuf Haddad was climbing, Sam Delaney was falling. Not in the way the world would notice. Sam was still Sam, still beloved, still fine. But the thing Sam cared about most, more than the fame, more than the old films, was quietly dying, and it was breaking his heart. For 6 years, Sam had been trying to make one particular movie. A small film. An unglamorous one. It was about exactly the kind of people the world walks past. The vendors, the day laborers, the immigrants. The invisible working hands that hold a city up while the city looks straight through them. Sam had poured his own money into it, his own years. He believed in it the way you believe in the last important thing you might get to do. And the industry did not want it. On that Tuesday in July, 9 months, almost to the day after the owl, Sam sat in his Burbank office and listened to a studio executive named Grant Weller tell him, over speakerphone, that the film was dead. The last piece of financing had fallen through. Weller was not cruel about it, just certain, in the flat way of a man who has never once been wrong in his own estimation. Sam, nobody wants to watch a movie about a guy who sells fruit on a corner. There's no audience. There's no story there. These people, I'm sorry, but honestly, who cares? Make me the thriller. Kill the immigrant thing. It was never going to work. Who cares? Weller hung up, and the words hung in the office. And Sam Delaney sat alone at his desk, 60 years old. And for the first time in a long time, he wondered if the cynical men were simply right. If the small, invisible people he'd spent his whole life trying to point a light at really were, to everyone but him, nobody. If all his stubborn insistence that ordinary dignity mattered was just a sentimental old man losing an argument he'd been losing for years. He looked at the poster for the dead film on his wall, and he thought, maybe nobody cares. Maybe I've been wrong the whole time. There was a knock at the outer office. His assistant, June, leaned in. Apologetic, Sam? There's a gentleman here without an appointment. He says, he has a card he says Dale sent him about the scene shop, but Dale retired 2 years ago, so I don't really know. She lowered her voice. He's older. He's got a box with him. I can send him away, it's been a day, I know, no, Sam said. He didn't know why. He was tired and gutted, and he had every reason to say send him away. No. Send him in. And Yusuf Haddad walked into Sam Delaney's office, 9 months and 1 lifetime after a sidewalk in October, holding a wooden box. Finally. Brave enough to knock on the door. They didn't recognize each other at first. 9 months is a long time, and Sam met 1,000 people, and Yusuf had walked in braced for a stranger. Yusuf set the box on the desk, and his hands were shaking, and his rehearsed English came out formal and stiff. I am sorry. No appointment. A man gave me this card some time ago. He said a shop for building. I was afraid to come. I am not afraid anymore, so here I am. Too late, maybe. He pushed the card across the desk, worn soft now, 9 months over a heart. He said, tell them Sam sent you. Sam picked up the card, his own handwriting, and then he looked at the box, and then at the man's scarred, precise hands, and then at the man's face, and it all came back at once. The owl, Sam said quietly. You made me an owl. Outside the hardware store. Yusuf Haddad went very still. You, he whispered. You are, this is your. He looked around the office, at the film posters, at the name on the door, and the whole impossible geometry of it arrived on his face. The man on the sidewalk. Sam, this is your company. Sit down, Sam said. Please, sit down. And then, because it was the kind of day it was, and because his heart was raw and open, you have no idea how badly I needed somebody to walk through that door today. I don't even know what you're here for yet, and I already know it. Yusuf sought, and he opened the box. Inside was not a trinket. Inside was a carving, a large one, months of work, the finest thing Yusuf Haddad had made since Aleppo. It was a pair of hands. Working hands, a laborer's hands, carved so true you could count the calluses. Cupped and open, and resting in the palms was a tiny, perfect city, small buildings rising out of the working hands that held them up. I made this for you, Yusuf said. In the church, on the nights. I did not know it was for you. I thought I would never find you again. But I made it, because of what you said to me. You said I did not stop being a master when I crossed the ocean. You said the wood remembers. 9 months I have carved, because of one afternoon, because one man stopped and asked me who taught me. His eyes were wet, and he let them be. The hands are all of us. The men no one sees. And they are holding up the whole city. And the city does not know. I wanted you to have it. I did not know it would be you. Maybe I think God knew. Sam Delaney looked at a carving of working hands holding up a city. The exact film he had been told, 40 minutes earlier, that no one on earth would ever care about, sitting on his desk, made by one of the invisible men himself, carried in by a master the world had thrown away, who had climbed back out with his own 2 hands, and turned around to lift 4 more. And Sam Delaney, 60 years old, put his face in his hands and wept in his own office, because the answer to who cares had just walked through his door, carrying it in a box. Here is what happened after. Sam did not make Yusuf a set builder. He did something much better. The film that was dead came back to life because Sam Delaney walked into Grant Weller's office 3 days later, set the carving of the working hands on his desk, and told him Yusuf's story. The workshop in Aleppo, the shell, the crossing, the folding table, the $20, the block of basswood, the church basement, the 4 men, the box. And even Grant Weller, who cared about nothing, was quiet for a long time. Sam funded it himself in the end, most of it, and called in 40 years of favors for the rest, and he made his small, unglamorous film about the invisible people. But he changed it. Because now, he had met one. He hired Yusuf Haddad as the film's craft lead and cultural consultant. And then, when he saw what the man could do, he built a whole thread of the story around a character based on him. And he insisted the sets be built by real displaced craftsmen, and Yusuf brought his 4 men from the church basement. And they built the world of that film with their own master hands and got paid a real wage to be masters again. The film came out 2 years later. It was called These Hands. It was small and quiet, and it was not supposed to matter to anyone. It mattered to everyone. It made back its budget many times over, because it turned out that Grant Weller was wrong, that people are starving to see the invisible finally made visible, that who cares is a failure of imagination and not a fact about the world. The carving of the working hands holding up the city is the film's final image. Yusuf Haddad's name is in the credits. Twice, Yusuf never went back to the folding table. He has a real workshop now, a good one, in a warehouse, with tools worn smooth by his hands, employing 11 men, which is exactly how many he had in Aleppo, and he did not plan that number, but he wept when Layla pointed it out. He is Ustad again. People come from other places to commission his doors. His daughter Layla is studying architecture. She says she wants to design buildings worthy of being held up by hands like her father's. And the $20 bill, the one Sam gave him on the sidewalk in October, Yusuf never spent it. That's not quite true. He spent it on the basswood, we know that. But when he got his first real paycheck from the film, he went to the bank and got a crisp new 20, and he framed it, and it hangs in his workshop where every new man can see it, with a small carved plaque beneath it that Yusuf made himself. The plaque says, in English and in Arabic, "A stranger stopped." That is all it takes. Now you stop for the next one. Sam Delaney still stops. On sidewalks, at folding tables, at the edges of the frame where the world isn't looking. He always did. He always will. But he says now, he said it in interviews, though he won't say Yusuf's name, because Yusuf's story is Yusuf's to tell, that he used to think stopping was something the strong did for the weak, and that he doesn't think that anymore. He thinks now that when you stop for someone, you have no idea, none, whether you're the one doing the helping or the one who's about to be saved. That's the part I keep coming back to. I've told this story a number of times, and people always want to talk about the beautiful symmetry of it. The $20 that comes back. The man who walks into the office on the very day. The carving that answers the exact question Sam was drowning in. And it is beautiful. I won't pretend it isn't. But that's not the part that stays with me. The part that stays with me is that when Sam Delaney gave that man $20 on a sidewalk in October, he had absolutely no idea he was doing it for himself. He thought he was the strong one. He thought he was the one with something to give. The money, the card, the connection, the kind word. He was the movie star. Yusuf was the man behind the folding table. Every part of that afternoon told Sam that he was the giver, and Yusuf was the receiver, and that the kindness flowed one direction, from the man who had everything to the man who had nothing. And it turned out he had it exactly backwards. It turned out that the $20 he dropped into the dark, expecting nothing, never thinking of it again, was the seed of the one thing that would come back 9 months later and save him, save his faith, save his film, save the belief he'd spent his whole life on and was one bad phone call from abandoning. The man he thought he was rescuing walked into his office on his worst day and rescued him right back. We never know. That's the whole thing. When you are kind to someone, when you stop, when you see the person the world is walking past, when you give the $20 and the kind word and expect nothing, you cannot possibly know whether you are the strong one helping the weak one, or whether you are quietly, blindly, planting the exact thing that will one day be the only thing that can carry you. The giver and the receiver trade places so often and so invisibly that after a while you stop being able to tell which one you are. So you might as well just be kind to everyone. Not because it comes back. It doesn't always come back, and you can't do it for that. But because the person behind the folding table, the one the whole world is walking past, might be a master, might be the one who's holding up the city, might, 9 months from now, be the only person alive who can walk into your office on your worst day and set the answer down on your desk. You never know who you're really stopping for. I think that's reason enough to stop for everyone. This story is a work of fiction. Sam Delaney, Yusuf Haddad, Amira, Layla, Grant Weller, June, and every place and event in it were created for this narration. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. If a stranger ever stopped for you, saw you when you were invisible, said the one thing that reminded you who you were, tell me about them in the comments. Say what they did. Those small moments are the whole reason this channel exists. And if there's someone in your life who's behind their own folding table right now, drowning quietly where no one's looking, send them this. Be the stranger who stops. That's all it takes. If you want more stories told this way, slowly, and with respect for everyone in them, subscribe, and I'll have the next one ready for you. Take care of each other. I'll see you in the next one.